up to page 8 from L5R. Um, we got up to page 8 and we kind of ended at the Way of the Five Rings. Now, our impressions of the core rulebook for the 5th edition of Legend of the Five Rings have been kind of. I mean, you know what? I want to actually step back. Emma, I know Monty, you've worked on L5R, so I'm not going to ask you this question because it puts you on the spot. But Emma and Steve, I want to ask both of you if your opinions of L5R have changed since we last read it.
Maybe I'll go first.
Yeah.
So my impression going into it was it's going to be better than Oriental Adventures. And it's like a really popular game. So I assume like the game part of it, like the actual like doing things in the game world in that space, probably pretty fun. And yeah, it's way better than Oriental Adventures. I would say it exceeded that expectation. Today, I think we're going to get into a little bit of the mechanics and like how the role playing game is done. But I also had like this nagging feeling that I would find some weird spores of like Orientalism scattered throughout. I do see that. I think the degree to which those spores have been like groomed and how much harm they ultimately will do is quite low. But if you were to come to me and be like, Steve, would you like to join my L5R LARP? I would probably very politely but firmly decline and not join.
Would you play this RPG? I think I would.
In so far right now of what I know about it, I am disinterested in playing this RPG.
I think based on the first seven pages, I'd play it heavily modified. That's what I would do. Emma, how about you?
I had any expectations coming into it, other than I assumed it would be a mashup of various cultures and traditions. So I guess surprised that it's not as blatant as it could be, but also still wondering why there are things that are the way they are.
There's this great Michael Scott quote when he's talking to Dwight, and he's like, "Why are you the way that you are?"
Yeah.
And often I look at games and I say that. For me,
I've always thought that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I've always thought that about like movie versions of books. So if I've read the book first and then I watch the movie, it's like, why did you change that? Because the book version is just as or better. Like, who decided that and why?
It's like going to M. Night Shyamalan and being like, why did you cast white people in Avatar: The Last Airbender? You literally had one job. You fucked it up.
Yeah.
So what the chat is asking, like, what would I do in terms of modifications? Again, like, we haven't touched on the game mechanics yet. I know there were a lot of people in the chat last week who were like, well, if you just read further into the book, it'll change. That's not the point. The point is our impression as we read through the book. So our impression could change. We could grow to really love L5R. We could grow to really detest L5R. Or our opinion could stay entirely the same. For me, what I think I would heavily modify is the fact that you're playing as samurai. And I know L5R is about clans, and I know it's all about that. But I don't think I'd honestly want to play as an honor-bound samurai. Thematically. Mechanically, I don't know if that's even possible. And Monty, you could even correct me at this point. But I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what the Path of Waves supplement is all about. It's all the people who have not fit into this, samurai caste, I guess, of the clans and such. People who are kind of living in between, in the cracks, I guess, is the term.
And I find that like far more interesting. I actually, like, my partner and I, we watched Princess Mononoke this week. I mean, all the Ghibli movies are on Netflix now.
Yeah.
And I was watching it and thinking, like, look at this. It's a Japanese movie with Japanese characters. And, they're talking about, like, nature and spiritualism, and there's war and there's political strife, and not one fucking mention of honor. And you know that honor is there. You know that people abide by codes of conduct, and you know that people have morals. But
There's also some sorry, I feel like I cut people off a lot.
That's
but
okay.
Mononoke is also interesting because there's sort of a representation of like another culture within the story, right?
I was gonna say that next. Yeah, the Amishi.
Yeah. So the Amishi are a proto-historic, if not prehistoric, group of people. I don't know how much they base that on actual like history, but the Amishi are a northern group and culture. So yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because I mean the main character is an Amishi prince,
Mhm.
and the story about him is really interesting because he encounters samurai. And I think if they are indeed Amishi, because they kind of say that, insinuate that he is, this would take place at a time before the Sengoku Jidai, which is what L5R is very much based on. But the samurai there are very much not honor bound. They're soldiers. They're well trained. They get fucked up in that movie, but they're well trained, and they're just professional soldiers. They're warriors. And that got me thinking about L5R and how much I want to play the characters that aren't samurai. So Monty, that supplement was Path of Waves?
Path of Waves.
Yeah, that sounds super. Like, I honestly would love to read that. I would love to see what they do with that book because that actually sounds really interesting to me. So my opinion's kind of changed in that, like, I don't want to play as samurai. And I don't know if that completely undermines what L5R is until, Path of Waves. But anyways, let's get into it. The Way of Five Rings. And I'll start reading because I've got the spoons for it right now.
All right.
At the dawn of I want to start with, and if you in the chat know or Monty or any of you know, but this is supposed to be based on Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, right? The Way of Five Rings. So like it's so close. I can't imagine that they wouldn't.
Apparently it's in the resources. So someone tweeted this at me that there are further resources and reading if you're interested.
So Book of Five Rings is in there? Because Miyamoto Musashi was... Oh, go ahead, Monty.
Oh, no. Basically, the Legend of Five Rings takes the elements of the Book of Five Rings and basically turns it into a whole like magical spiritual system.
Cool.
So, yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Miyamoto Musashi was a legendary swordsman in Japanese history. There's a great manga about him called Vagabond. That's super violent and really cool. But he authored a book on Kenjutsu called The Book of Five Rings. And it was a book on warfare and life and spiritualism. And it's broken into these chapters, these books. There's like wind, earth, water, fire, and void. In this game, they changed wind into air. But in general, they're structured after the book. So at the dawn of civilization, when humanity looked to understand the surrounding creation, the greatest philosophers determined that the world was composed of five elements: air, earth, fire, water, and the void that holds the other elements together. These elements, also called rings, were represented in the sacred spirits of the land and the natural world, but also in society and the human psyche. Air is the weather and the wind, the invisible and the innuendo, and the swiftness of a bird of prey. Earth is stone, wood, and metal, as well as donkey's stubbornness and a tortoise's patience. Fire is the gentle warmth of the sun or the rage of a wildfire, but also the spark of innovation, the passion of devotion, and the ferocity of a wildcat. Water is an octopus's adaptability and flexibility. It takes the shape of its container, be it a puddle, a river, or endless sea. Void is the emptiness of the night sky or nirvana, at once present and transcendent. Thoughts on that first paragraph?
I like it.
I kind of dig it.
I think it's cool. I read that and I'm like, cool. I know exactly what these five rings are. I'm primed up. I got like a little bit of like a sneak preview of like what kind of stuff I can expect. I'm ready. I'm primed. I'm ready to like learn the rules and like make a character.
Yeah, I'm pretty into it, to be honest. Not gonna lie, I'm like, oh, that's pretty sweet. I'm like, oh, look at that. You could be the void. You're sky, nirvana. What I also really like is that fire isn't just rage, isn't just destructive power or energy. Fire is creation. And I really like that they did that, because you see a lot of games where they'll take fire as an element and they'll make it something it's just destructive. But in many, in many cultures, in the universally human experience, fire is creation, fire is warmth, fire is life. But also, like in religions, we see it like in Agni, who is one of the Hindu deities of fire. Agni has two heads, one for the destructive side of fire and one for the creative abilities of fire, the life-giving sides of fire. So I think that's really cool. I really like that. The fire part in particular, I really like. Oh, fuck, come on. Sensei across Rokugan teach samurai in training to observe and express these different elements in all that they do. In the Legend of the Five Rings role-playing game, characters are defined by their strength in different elements. This strength is represented mechanically with a numeric value on a scale of 1 to 5, called a character's ring value. In every task they undertake, they must choose an elemental approach, and the suitability of one approach over another can give them the edge they need to or diminish their chance of succeeding. Okay, so the rings. So Monty, the rings are their attributes essentially.
It's I think the idea is that it's that character's connectedness to those kinds of approaches. So whenever your character ends up doing something, you will kind of describe, how am I doing it? Am I being calm about it? Am I being like passionate about it? And then you'll end, or am I being aggressive? Am I being very conservative and pulling back a little bit? So then you'd end up picking one of those elements. And so to roll that many dice.
So you're basically rolling with how you think your character is approaching something, how your character feels. So unlike D&D, right, where it's like roll dexterity for this one's like
there are skills, but like your initial approach is talking about how you're going about doing things and fitting that into the 5-ring, matrix, I guess.
That's cool. That's cool. I like that. Okay, next page. Samurai and society. Okay. In Rokugan, it is said that honor is stronger than steel. And again, please stop me. While even the finest blade can bend and break or twist under the heat of the forge, the Emerald Empire Society has been folded in the forges of politics and war for more than 1,000 years, and it has not yet broken. The Society of Rokugan follows a divinely ordered pattern set down by the Ten Kami, who shared their celestial blessings with the mortal realm. Rokugan is a land of strict social stratification, where an improper look at the wrong time can mean death. Face, the concept of a samurai's stoicism and outward self-control, is paramount in Rokugan. To lose one's face is to lose one's status and reputation in society, and potentially one's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's typical.
So, yeah, super typical. But like, let's go ahead and draw that line, that direct one-dimensional like connection from Oriental Adventures right to this. And it's that this society just seems really cruel, and like cruel is that one word that kept coming up, and the idea that you could look at someone wrong and they'll just kill you for it is like, one, super scary, and two, totally not how a society can really run. And especially if it worked for 1,000 years like that. Like that is intense. No one like complained.
Yeah, and I guess like like this is our first impression of it. I honestly I was super jazzed by this Way of the Five Rings bit, and then we there's no more 5 rings. I wanted to read more about it.
It almost seems like this, like setting up the strictness of society takes away the flexibility of the 5 rings, like differences in personalities and approaches.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I think it's interesting that they talked about saving face, and they talked about reputation and status.
Okay, get out of here.
I mean, they're really painting they're painting a very, very specific picture of what they want this fantasy Japan to look like. And I think that's all that really needs to be said here. The root of the word samurai is literally one who serves. The samurai rule the Emerald Empire as nobles and lords, but they also serve others. Whether the people of Rokugan below or those samurai who sit as lords above them. Most samurai fall into one of three broad categories. Bushi, who train their martial skills, courtiers, who engage in deadly political games, and shugenja, who serve as priests and conduits between the mortal and sacred realms. Okay, let's talk about that. Because this is something that came up with Oriental Adventures. The Shugenja was a class in Oriental Adventures, and when Steve and I were very new to Oriental Adventures, when we were reading it, we were like, what's this? And we Googled it and couldn't find anything. We were like, okay, let's move on. And a lot of people commented and were like, well, the Shugenja is based on the Shugendo.
Is just kind of like person who is part of that, or like Sha or Ja, yeah.
And so I think it's important to talk about how they kind of say the samurai are, these warriors. They're also political agents, but they're also priests who are able to channel spiritual powers. And while I get they're doing something organizational here and they're trying to fit the players into classes, what I don't like about this is that they basically take all of these very interesting aspects of feudal Japanese society, like the Shugendo, and they reduce them down to just something that the samurai does as a job. Or they do that, they reduce it down to something that is samurai. When the Shugendo were not samurai at all. They were monks.
And also ascetics. So completely removed from the rest of society.
Yeah. But these samurai, according to this world, are, they have high social status. Yeah.
So I mean, that gives me weird kind of dissonance here, because more ahead you'll see that samurai are basically feudal knights who collect taxes or rice from the people. It's really their job. But if they're a shugenja and their job is to be separated from society, and that's what they want to do, it's really hard to collect taxes if you're separated from society. So we have kind of lost that nuance there, and that gives me a little bit of friction.
Yeah, and that's it.
There's also a lot of vow of silence around Shugendo, so you're not doing anything.
You just hold out your hand and expect taxes.
Yeah, here I am. Taxes, please.
But you can't even say that. Yeah.
No.
It's just that, I mean, I don't want to dwell on this because then we'll just be on page 9 forever. It's just reductive, and that's it. I think the world could be so much richer. Yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say about that. Government and power. Rokugan is a feudal society. All of the land belongs to the emperor, who bestows the rights of stewardship on champions and lords within the great clans, who in turn pass on the tasks of administration to lesser ranked samurai. Pretty much. All imperial authority and patterns of life proceed from the Hantai, the emperor, who is descended from divinity and sits on the Emerald Throne. He is attended primarily by his jeweled champions, the Emerald Champion in particular, and by the champions of the great clans. I'm assuming this is a lore thing. The clan champions are masters of the great clans, overseeing the families sworn to each. These families are descended from the heroic mortals who swore fealty to the kami. The various families within the clan are themselves ruled over by daimyo, literally the great names. Is that the literal translation? Lords of the families, who hold power over life and death over their kin and command absolute loyalty. Their individual lands are divided into provinces, the divisions of land in Rokugan, which are ruled over by lesser daimyo, who themselves rule over district and city governors, lords of rich lands and wealthy cities. The clans and their representatives vie for dominance in the courts of these daimyo. prevailing over others with silk and steel. Okay.
So right off the bat, away from like a cultural lens, those are two really hard paragraphs to read, just because you have just thrown like 12 proper nouns at us. And I remember reading through that, and it took me like a very long time. Like I had to get like a second drink to get through the second paragraph. I get it, but I am very much a reader who is like, so what? You gave all this information. How does that help me like play the game? And at this moment in time, it really doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not like a critical cultural lens on that. That's just my like my experience living through like this text right now.
I think it's just that L5R, they know their fan base, and they know their fan base is really into the lore, and so they in general should already know about this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, daimyo means like a big name or great name. That's a thing. But like the whole point of all of the samurai era is that there wasn't an emperor. So I don't know why we have an emperor who's in charge of all of this.
Yeah, because what about the shogun, like the military dictator?
It was they were called shogunates. Yeah, so if an emperor was around, it was usually like a child or someone who was easy to control, and they had no power whatsoever.
I think in this setting, in this version, it is. I think it is a child. If not, it's definitely a weak imperial court. So yeah.
Right.
Okay, cool. So I mean that lines up.
I would say though, as I was doing like research into just general Japanese history around this time period, the idea of a shogun and an emperor and the tension between those two figureheads was like super interesting for me. And I was like, wow, why isn't that in the game? Right? To me, it was kind of like, I love when games give me a jumping off point to like do more like research and like enrich myself in other human experiences. I felt like a missed opportunity here. I get that we are extending off something written in the early 90s, 80s.
80s, I think. 80s or 90s? When was L5R first published?
It was after OA. That's when
Yeah, it was after OA. So after 85.
Yeah. But like it was a missed opportunity, and I think there is still opportunity to go back and like just change it. It's all fiction anyways. There totally could be a shogun. Anyways.
Yeah. There's only one thing, like there's the whole shogun thing, and I think, yeah, I mean, they have the right to do whatever they want. They can say that there is no shogun, and they can say that this is all divine and whatnot. The one thing I don't like is they say at the end, the clans and their representatives vie for dominance in the courts of these daimyo, prevailing over others with silk and steel. What does that say? One, it says like through violence. What is silk for? I think we all know what they're talking about.
For me, though, like, okay.
No, go ahead.
This, that whole idea of conflict or contrast, like that there's some sort of inherent binary thing, like, okay, I'm not saying this very well. It's really hot here, so my brain is like half capacity, but like, in anthropology, for the longest time, people were fascinated with Japan because they saw it as a land of contrast, that you were both like aggressive and meek at the same time. Like you were worried about your individual honor, but also concerned about the greater mass of people. Like, man, like early anthropologists were all over that. So Ruth Benedict was one of the big ones. She wrote Chrysanthemum and the Sword. And so anything coming back to this like contrast of soft and hard, fluid, rigid, all of that just brings that back for me. It's like, oh, the land of contradictions, so complicated. And you'll still see it in like,
I mean, we're seeing it right here.
But you'll see it in academic publications as well, how deeply seated these concepts are. It still gets published in high-ranking journals about like pop culture and society. So like, yeah, very real force. And for me, I'm just kind of tired of it because check out how long ago that was introduced. Oh boy.
I mean, to go off of that, the whole idea of contradictions and oh, it's so exotic and it's so different because there are things that don't match up. I mean, like that's what happens when you have a diverse society. Yeah. That's interesting. That's a really good point too.
I have more critical things to say about putting people in a box like that and how it's a tool of oppression. But let's hold on to that hot pepper. Let's just put that in our pocket. Now we'll come back to that. Anyways, Dan, do you need a break from reading?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. My partner and I baked a pizza. We made a pizza from scratch, and she brought it up. I'm like, oh my god, I want to eat it now, but I'm reading.
Oh, you put yourself on mute. You enjoy that.
I'm
pizza.
gonna put myself on mute.
While we do that, the way of the samurai is the way of the warrior. Most are trained from birth to fight for their lords and lay down their lives if need be. When ownership of a territory falls in dispute, or when threats from beyond the empire's borders imperil the very existence of the empire, the daimyo of the clans mobilize their armies and fight for the champion, or on behalf of the emperor as part of the imperial legions. The emperor permits his vassals to take a share of the annual rice harvest so that they may arm themselves for war and defend the lands they have been entrusted with. Not all wars are one. No, go for it.
I was gonna say, get that rice.
Yeah. The rice is very important, and that is not the last time we're going to hear about how rice is important for the society to function. Yeah. I'm sure Daniel was like on like a tasty morsel of pizza there, and just like rice came up, and it was completely it turned to ash in his mouth.
I fucking hate it when they're just like, oh yes, rice. I think because Emma and I think there are very few people on the planet who have had to read and learn about rice as much as Emma and I. And just yeah, or just like travel around China with a bunch of botanists, and just like, okay, so for context, Emma and I, when did we go all over China? Remember we went on that like speaking tour?
Yeah. 2015?
I think it was in 2015. We basically drove around China in a van.
For 2 weeks.
As a part of like a longer trip. And I remember being stuck in the back of the van with one of our other colleagues. But we went on this tour of China, and we went all over the country. We saw a lot of the different regions in China. We ate a lot of different food, but we also saw that like, you know, Asia is so different, and like rice wasn't big in a lot of the places where we went. And so that for me, I hate it when games are like, yes, in this Asian land, everyone eats rice. It bothers me very, very, very much so. Anyway, sorry. That's my rice diatribe. I'm done.
No, it's perfectly fine. There's definitely like a weird presence of rice. And if you are a person who's like fresh kind of reading it and you don't really expect it, it kind of just like picks at you. It just kind of like sort of digs at you a little bit. And for me personally, rice was definitely used as like a microaggression against me growing up. So every time I see a society depiction where it's like really focused on rice, I immediately go to see who wrote about it, because now it's like a safety concern for myself, right? Am I going to have to relive a little bit of bullying as a child? Maybe. And I should be ready for that. Anyways, moving on. Not all wars, however, are won on the battlefield. Samurai, skilled in the subtle arts of the courtier, fight their battles with honeyed words and mocking, tittering laughter behind face-concealing fans. Their arena is the courts, be they the provincial courts of city or family daimyo, the castles of the clan champions, or the famed yet deadly imperial court. In these places of delicate and indirect speech, impeccable etiquette is a better defense than the finest katana when a samurai walks into court. Courtiers seek out one another for private meetings, each expressing their clan's wishes indirectly and sealing treaties with honor and promises rather than ink and parchment. We gotta talk about that. So I remember reading this and just like being taken aback a little bit, because yes, it's a world of like dichotomy and what have you, but what you've done is you've kind of painted a picture of a samurai who just does war and collects taxes from the people, and then the samurai who is a tittering person laughing behind a fan, right? And if you were to picture those in your mind, you've created other like binaries, and those binaries put people in the boxes, and that can like really cause some harm here. To be specific, I think courtiers are absolutely a feminized version of like what this is supposed to be. You're supposed to think of like a geisha, I assume. Like that's kind of the imagery they're going for.
Well, yeah, I've never heard anything masculine described as tittering.
Yeah. and that like I don't like that because what it's done is it kind of limits your options. So like I could be a courtier. I could go into court. I'm a handsome guy. I have honeyed words. I could be charming. I could like convince people to like make promises to me, but I'm not going to titter behind a fan. And that puts me
Emma's got the fan too going.
I can't.
Yeah, I know.
That would put me in a really weird box. And if I were to be in this society and I was a man and I were in court and I'm known for being like a good politician, immediately you're going to think about, well, what other feminine qualities might this man have? Or we took the other way. If you're a samurai who's focusing on war and you're not a man, now you're looking for like what masculine features does this not man have? And it just like creates a lot of tension. And that's that tension and like that weird kind of gray area where you might be causing harm to potential readers and potential players.
Yeah, I can't add anything. My big thing is like,
too much pizza.
Why are they writing on parchment? Why aren't they writing on paper?
Have you yet like educated our audience on like paper and parchment, that kind of stuff? Because I don't recall a paper rant from Daniel Kwan yet. TM.
No, we ranted about paper. We ranted about paper because there was an item called the Crane of Folding in Oriental Adventures.
You're right.
And in order to use this magical item, which turns into a large paper animal when you fold it, you need to have proficiency in origami. And you could only get proficiency in origami if you were like, higher, like a higher status character. But for me, it's like in Asia they had paper, they had real paper. Parchment is not paper, although we like to think it is paper. Right, when we're talking about like our D&D games and other fantasy games that are centered on Europe, we talk about parchment, but parchment isn't paper in the way that we understand it. It's made from skin, made from animal skin. That's just me nitpicking, though. I'm just like, it's paper. Just write ink and paper. But a lot of people put in parchment, and I've seen this in game design. A lot of people put in parchment because they want to imply that something is old. Now, I'm not trying to say that they're trying to say that Asia is old, but in general, people just say, "Oh, parchment," because it's ancient and old. But I think one of the things I've noticed is that this is continuing that trend that Emma brought up of contrasts and how they describe things. Anyways, let's keep going.
Yeah, so finishing this off, winter is harsh in Rokugan, and battles cannot be fought in the bitter cold in impassable snow. Thus, winter is when court is most active, for there is little else to do except attend court. The Emperor's Winter Court is a highly selective social event with higher stakes and rewards than any other. Yeah, winter's cold.
Yeah, winter's cold.
Not in most of Japan. It is
No.
like whatever. This is a different place, but still, like, it's interesting that they make what you can do seasonal.
I think it's a cool, like, from a game design perspective, I think it's cool. Like, I like to box in my campaigns to like have a very like cinematic flow, like even an act structure if it makes sense for that particular game. I could absolutely do a 4 seasons campaign. Like, that's a really fun thing to do. And you start in autumn, go right into like the political side of winter, play spring and summer, and end with summer being basically like a big combat maybe. This is cool. I like that. Seasons are cool.
It's like the House of... Have you ever seen House of Flying Daggers?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that. There's like the fight scene with all the leaves in the fall. That's. See, I like that. I know it's kind of neat, but it's just like, I don't know, seasons happen. I think what's interesting about this game so far is that they just they're trying really hard to make this seem interesting, trying to make this seem different. In many ways, they make it kind of interesting, but in other ways, they're like they lean on these more refined stereotypes, I will say. And I say refined in that they're just kind of, they're unoffensive, right? It's like, oh, Japan, samurai, but they're just old and kind of boring. Anyways, let's go to crime and punishment.
I'm still thinking about winter because they've lived 1,000 years under like this like feudal system, and they still like winter's too hard to fight and we don't do it anymore.
I'm sure we're gonna get into that, unless Monty, you know something, but I don't.
But then, like, yeah, this could be interesting because if it's too cold to fight, that means all of the people who usually aren't in the cities and in the courts are going to have to combine with all of the people who don't usually have to deal with them, right? Or am I going too far? Not?
No, that's actually really interesting. Because, like, yeah, if people aren't fighting, people are staying indoors. They do have drama of a different nature.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually interesting.
Cool stuff here. Let's move on. So we talked about tittering laughter, and now we move on to crime and punishment. I'm never gonna give up tittering behind a fan. Her demure hands lifted her fan to her porcelain white, like,
Yeah.
crime and punishment.
Okay, come on.
The task of stewarding the land for the emperor requires a samurai to execute the emperor's will. This includes the emperor's laws, which are collected and enforced by the Emerald Champion. The maintenance of order, law, and justice in Rokugan, in that order of importance, is one of the primary responsibilities of the samurai. Crime in Rokugan is much the same as anywhere else. Theft, assault, murder, and arson are all known within the Emerald Empire. I remember reading this, and like the order of it was very strange.
Order, law, and justice. Order comes first, then law, then justice.
Or said another way, justice is less important than the law.
Yeah, so it's a little weird, but I think they're trying to. I think they're trying to create a society that is unequal, and they are doing that in very obvious ways by saying, "Hey, there is very strict and severe social stratification. Justice is less important than order." I don't know. I don't see
Justice is also subjective and
super subjective. Exactly.
kind of relative. Like, I don't know. Order is too, but like law is something that's written down, and then justice is people's perception of whether or not order and law were essentially maintained or met. You know.
I think in this, the way this is supposed to be read, because of the other things about Rokugan, order is like a cosmic order, is what they mean. They mean like the cosmic order of like, here's a hierarchy of like life and like
Right.
what is more virtuous, I guess.
And
Law.
spiritual.
Law comes from the emperor. The emperor is absolutely divinely given right. So law is basically the will of heaven, and then justice is people. So you're right, they're like creating that like thing. I would just like it to be written like that, right? Like that. I think it's more accessible. Anyways, to enforce laws and maintain an orderly society within their borders, provincial daimyo appoints special investigators called magistrates.
Sorry, can I just stop for a second?
Yeah.
They said crime in Rokugan is much the same as anywhere else.
Yeah.
Theft, assault, murder, and arson are all known within the Emerald Empire. They're basically saying like crime happens, people
Crime
kill each other,
happens.
people burn shit.
Yeah, burn it down.
Monty and Emma in Oriental Adventures, there's literally a page, and it's like 4 paragraphs of them saying like things happen in the Orient, people are born, people die, weather happens.
People are people.
People are people. I just think this is silly because they're just saying crime happens. And it's just like, yes, thank you. That's
It creates tension for me because it's like you had to define like crime happens. What else like happens that I have to like be defined for in case it's not the same as like how I know it?
Right. It's the contrast that Emma was talking about, right? Like this is how much things are different, but this is how much things are same, right? Trying to orient the no pun intended. The reader. Sorry, it was not even intentional.
Somebody click that,
Like,
please.
you know, I can't believe that's going to be on a stream permanently out there. But no, you know, it's like we're assuming the reader doesn't know anything at all, and then so it has to do these very wide, you know, what do you call it? Going, you know, being very obvious about how this is different, but maybe too much. Being really obvious about how things are exactly the same, but it'd be a little bit too much, right? So
Yeah. Like they eat food with their mouths and they breathe through their noses. Like, okay, cool.
well, rice, maybe not food, but just rice. But
Oh yeah, rice. It's all about rice.
Let's not forget.
no, I can imagine. I'm just the thoughts I have is that because again, from a freelancer point of view, I can imagine it must be really hard to try to be faithful to the original IP, but then try to do a new spin to it, but then also appeal to people who don't know anything about the setting. I mean, honestly, I would say that would be a tough job.
You know what I would have done? I would have just gone for like a grimdark game. I would have gone for a grimdark, and there was actually Grim and Perilous, Zweihander RPG. They actually they acquired the license for Tetsubo, and they were going to make a grimdark Japanese samurai RPG. It wasn't just going to be samurai, and they asked me about it, and I talked to them, and they actually canceled the project because they didn't have an all Asian team, which is like that's a big move. But for me, what I would have loved, I think another thing I would have changed if I were to play it, or if I were to just do L5R, I would make it dark as fuck. And like, there's this illusion that the samurai are honor bound, and maybe this illusion is all a facade to outsiders and those who are inside Rokugan. Maybe the samurai are not as honorable as you think. That would be cool. Anyways, let's
also more accurate.
Also way more accurate. Again, back on the whole thing of like rewatching Princess Mononoke and seeing like the samurai there. I'm like, yeah, there we go. They're soldiers. So we were at magistrate after I interrupted you. Sorry, Steve.
That's perfectly fine. Don't worry. These magistrates are loyal to clan and daimyo and are assisted by yoriki, lesser ranking samurai, budoka, armed peasant vassals, in tracking and apprehending criminals. Historically, two classes of magistrate have attended to imperial crimes. Emerald magistrates appointed by the Emerald Champion, and Jade magistrates appointed by the Jade Champion. I feel like I'm going to read the words Jade and Emerald a lot. The former investigate crimes crossing multiple clan boundaries or involving national personages. The latter were Shugendo, tasked with investigating crimes against religion or evil magic involving the Shadowlands, but the office has not been filled in centuries. Crimes committed upward or against those of higher social rank or against the social order are taken quite seriously by magistrates. Crimes committed downward, such as samurai's theft from a peasant, are rarely investigated unless the peasant has the backing of another samurai. Rokugani criminal justice is based on honor and considers only one form of evidence to be valid: eyewitness testimony, including confessions. Fines, public reprimands, and house arrest are common punishments for samurai, although if there's any doubt as to samurai's guilt, the defendant may challenge the offender to a duel, the winner of which is considered beyond reproach.
You sent me this on Facebook, Steve.
I did send you this on Facebook. I was reading through this and I was like, Daniel, before Friday, make sure you read this one sentence. And it's that there's only one form of evidence that's considered in their law system.
I love how they just went and described, they were like, law and order, but Rokugan. They were like, there are different kinds of cops.
Dun dun.
Dun dun. Spirit crimes.
Oh my god, that's exactly what they're doing.
I want to play Law and Order L5R. That's what it would be called. Samurai cops.
Did you see it? No.
Stapler-san, you're off the case. And then your badge and gun. Katana.
Give me your clan crest and your katana. Oh my god, is this a show?
Get Dick Wolf on it.
100% I would watch that and I would play that.
Law and Order L5R. That's it.
Oh, Daniel on. Send Daniel a message. But yeah, the reason I send it to you is because it caused like this dissonance in me where you have like this society and they just focus on this like one type of evidence for 1,000 years. That's all they did. And it's just like, it feels weird. It to me, that like really kills the idea that this is like a real functioning society, despite having read to this point 20 proper nouns I don't connect with. So
yeah, I think that's just the L5R experience right now. It's just you need to really know the world in order to understand the book.
So if I were to take this paragraph and just change it so that it was like more accessible and would actually open up more opportunities for people to write and plan, it's that eyewitness accounts are taken, eyewitness accounts from reputable sources are almost never questioned. When an eyewitness stands forward, they understand that if they are caught in a lie, that they can be heavily punished for it, and depending on the impact, might be executed. You get like this kind of feel of, yes, it's like heavily weighted, and yes, maybe we still have like these kind of things that for some people might seem very cruel, but we also don't have this like very black and white society where things are just either under column A or under column B. So
some folks in the chat, you know what, I appreciate you folks in the chat who are here because, you know, they're kind of providing some guidance. They're saying that it's a little bit more complicated, the sort of legal system in L5R. Hey, at least they have one, unlike like D&D. But they're saying it's just badly explained in the books. But apparently it's much better. Monty, I don't know if you know a little bit better.
I think I've mentioned before that the setting stuff is in the Emerald Empire book.
Right.
I feel like it dives deeper into this stuff. For me, I mean, for me as a player, that does feel weird because I feel like the core book should have enough to get you to understand what's going on. So,
Not
anyway,
all of us could be
that's
Steve and read the wrong book before the first stream.
I'm gonna hold on to that idea that I read the entire wrong book and not just like the first like 10 pages.
Oh, I didn't say you read the entire book, Steve.
Oh, but I'm saying that.
Okay. Steve is our L5R expert. You are our Rokugan
perfect.
scholar.
Great. I'm gonna do the community real proud here.
Okay, let's do this.
What do you want?
I want to talk about how you can always challenge your accusant to a duel, and if you win, everything's a-okay. I get what they're going for.
At least it's not like, I wonder, Monty or anybody in the chat, I wonder if they have rules for psychic duels like they do in Oriental Adventures, where you just kind of like stare at each other right in the eye, and then it's just over. I wonder, but you know what? I think like duels were really big at the time, like in like the pop culture, in like the historical texts of the time, like Miyamoto Musashi, another famous person from this time period, was credited to winning countless duels. So yeah, I'm not. Like, go ahead, Emma.
It's a major device within like Jidaigeki and all of those samurai platforms. So like, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I'm not upset with that. There are duels in here. It makes sense.
What I think is missing here, and like it's due to the fact that there's not enough text here to talk about it, but it wasn't so much that might makes right, which is exactly how it's written. If you were just like to read it right here, it reads might makes right, done. What's really happening here is that like if there's, I say, you say, and like we can't really agree on it, I could absolutely goad you into a fight and be like, if I beat you in a fight, that's so shameful that you just like don't pursue this anymore. And from what I know, that's what the duel really was. It was basically like, we cannot come to agreement. Let's just do this physically, and then it will be done.
Kaiba. Sorry.
Yugi boy.
God.
Yeah. This whole thing just kind of makes me think of Rashomon as well. The whole multiple eyewitnesses and everyone saying something different. So
yeah, it's you know what, they tried. I say we move on.
Sure.
Yeah, I had nothing to add really. It's just like that's what it made me think of.
Yeah.
Commerce.
Steve, are you still good to read?
I was gonna say, Emma and Monty, do you want to talk about rice some more here?
Right now?
Wait, is this
commerce and currency?
Is it oh god, yeah, okay, so we're gonna talk about rice.
I'm just gonna sneak out of frame to eat my pizza.
Yeah, okay. You mean you're not eating rice?
It's a rice
Here's the
pizza.
thing. I freaking love rice. I eat it all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's things going on. And
I love rice too. Like so much.
Okay. Should I read?
Please do, yeah.
All right. Rokugan's economic system is based on the land tilled by farmers and protected by the samurai. The emperor properly owns all land, yet leases it to the clans, which hereditarily lease it to their daimyo in turn. Given the limits of roads, often dangerous and unpaved affairs, many provinces become lawful lands unto themselves, where the daimyo acts as an extension of the emperor over the peasants who work the rice paddies. Yep, it is rice, a vital crop that keeps the Emerald Empire alive, that provides much of Rokugan's wealth. Barley, wheat, millet, soybeans, and rye are also common crops grown by farmers, but it is a yearly stipend of rice that forms the basis for currency in Rokugan, or koku. The clans able to harvest the most rice are among the wealthiest in the empire, and therefore the most influential politically. But to directly conflate wealth with power would be an insult to the importance placed on honor and virtue in society. Yeah. Well,
Tell me what's going through your mind here.
Well, like rice was a form of salary, and the whole idea of like salary being like paid in salt, same idea, paid in rice. But okay. There is a lot of food and edible plants in particular across Japan. And this idea of relying solely on rice is problematic even in like fully agricultural periods of Japan.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool. Like barley, wheat, millet, soybean. I don't know why they say soybeans, but soybean and rye. I don't know about rye.
Yeah, you would be the authority on this.
Yeah, like, I don't know. My research for, no one knows what my research is. That's cool. I do.
Do you want to? You should talk about your research.
Totally plug it. Your research is dope.
Yeah, so I try and reconstruct like people's like diet and cuisine essentially through microscopic remains of starchy plants. And all of these things listed here have starch, but not all of them are very distinct. So what I really look at are things like legumes and roots and tubers, bulbs, things that were super nutritious, easy to find, grew wild, and grew well in most areas of Japan. And yeah, so I just look for evidence of those going as far back as maybe like 12,000 years ago. Yeah.
The Jomon.
So
The
cool.
Jomon period, yeah.
Yeah. Which we've talked about on the stream.
Several times. But yeah, I don't know. They're not wrong. Like the whole currency system is based on like a bushel of rice, a koku.
Yeah, and they had coins, and there is coinage in this game.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know.
Let's keep moving. Where did we leave off? I'll start reading.
First column, last paragraph. Trade and commerce.
Okay, trade and commerce are indispensable for Rokugan to thrive. Duh. But it is considered dishonorable for samurai to involve themselves in such mercantile pursuits. Their primary concern should be with serving their lord, not personal enrichment. But virtue and reality can sometimes diverge. See, there we go. Nevertheless, to maintain a veneer of civility, samurai have leave monetary matters to non-samurai, who in turn seek the patronage of a powerful lord. This allows samurai to engage in trade and currency manipulation without sullying their honor with crash, uncouth avarice. Those few clans and families that flagrantly involve themselves in trade are looked down upon by the others, who see greed as incompatible with absolute loyalty.
I don't know how accurate that is.
Yeah, those. I know. I mean, I know what exactly they're trying to say, and this is just an extension of that. They're trying to say that the samurai are honorable, they're loyal, and they don't care about money. Money is dirty.
Yeah.
So they get somebody else to do it. That's what they're saying. It's like, it's kind of meh. That's it. There's nothing racist about this. It's just could do better.
And like when I say I don't know how accurate it is, that doesn't mean that it's not accurate. It just means I don't know much about that side of
and what they're doing
life
here is
and
they're developing they're showing other mechanisms for how they've stratified the society, and it's also based on who touches money, who engages in trade and commerce. That's as simple as that.
To me, so I remember reading this when I was doing research for my assignment, and to me, it kind of feels like it's trying to be like the anti-Dungeons and Dragons. You know, D&D, you're very like much about finding hordes of wealth or like gaining money and monetary, and especially with the previous passage about the tittering behind the fan, it's supposed to kind of feel like it's not about dungeon crawling. It's not about like adventuring, that type of thing. That was my first impression when I was way back a couple years ago when I first worked on this
that's a good insight, because it is reading like an anti D&D.
Yeah, that helped a lot of things kind of fall into place. That's in my head. that's like a good way to generally just describe a lot of the tension that I see. I'm like, why is that done? Oh, it's just kind of like anti D&D. I feel that.
Yeah.
I personally, of course, I kind of wish the anti-D&D wasn't, framed in a Asian only context. Like, it would have been interesting if this was like done in, a European court, with where manners are really important. Just a complete aside, this kind of reminds me of an old '90s movie called Ridicule. It was basically about a physician who goes to the French court in order to get patronage, money in order to drain a swamp and cure some diseases that are occurring to a village. But he finds out the French court is obsessed with, wordplay and etiquette and ridicule. And so the movie is about him trying to navigate this really weird, these social niceties that are veiled insults. And it's all about positioning through social one-upsmanship. And so, but that's a firmly European setting. And, that would be kind of fun to play in a role-playing game, I would think.
That's cool. This movie's highly decorated. Wow.
So I'm really glad you brought that up, because one of the criticisms we get on this podcast or the stream a lot is, Steve, Daniel, I get it. You're mad because you see Pan-Asian stuff and they're kind of mishmashing Asian cultures. But why don't you talk about how they mishmash European cultures? And first of all, that's a fallacy. When you're talking to someone who's talking about A and you're why aren't you talking about B? That is actually just derailing conversation, and it's very inconsiderate of what's going on. But B, it's actually really interesting, because what is happening is a double-edged sword. There's two sides to oppression, right? And what it does is it put Asians in a box of being anti-D&D, which is really court manipulation and that kind of stuff, and then D&D, which is really more colonialist, killing people and taking their stuff. So what happened?
D&D is a war game. D&D is a war game.
So what ended up happening was all the European cultures got kind of washed with this brush that was dipped in the paint can that is colonialism. And then whenever you brush aside and try to paint an Asian picture, you can't use that paint anymore because it's already been used by a different piece of art. Anyways, I'm glad you brought that up. That's really cool.
That's super cool.
I think we can move on.
Yeah. And you know what? I just want to also say something about the whole Europe thing, because it's a lot of people are hey, I don't mean to derail the conversation, but what about white people? It was what I saw so much on my Twitter. We know that D&D does Europe pretty poorly too. But we're not Europeans represent the podcast, or Asians represent. So that's why.
But also, it doesn't make it okay.
It doesn't also. It also
just
doesn't make it okay.
because they do it to other cultures doesn't mean it's okay to do it to the rest of cultures. Come on.
Yeah.
That's what? No. All right.
Okay, so the Celestial Order. Steve, you read all about this in the Emerald Empire book.
Yeah, I did, actually. So yeah, the idea that everything is coming directly from kami or divine beings here. So I'm happy to dive into this. So the Celestial Order. Belief and religion are inculcated into a samurai from birth and before, from the time of their last death. Spirits and gods are a fact of life for samurai, and faith folds with honor 1,000 times over in the steel of a samurai's soul. Faith in the gods, faith in the cycle of reincarnation, and faith in the divine mandate that binds the empire together.
Kind of like that imagery of the folding. I think it's cool.
I think it's really cool, and
cool.
I like that the samurais have faith in many things. Their faith is basically complex. Cool. The first sentence is also very hard to read. Anyways, the emperor is a divine being charged by Lady Sun with overseeing the mortal realm. The blood of literal gods, the kami, runs through the veins of the great clan's ruling families. The Tengoku organizes all of existence into a hierarchy. This system, the Celestial Order, so Tengoku is also the Celestial Order in this book, and I believe Tengoku is basically a Japanese word for heaven, is sacred and unquestionable, ordering both heaven and the Emerald Empire. From the emperor to the lowest Burakumin, all are born with a dharma, a sacred duty of the soul. The performance of this duty in life is how Rokugani's karma is measured, determining their judgment in Meido and potential rebirth into a higher or lower caste. So I am not a very religious person, but a lot of these words they've used here are like deeply ingrained in a lot of faith and religions, and we just kind of like sped by all of them at like Mach 3. Like we're just like people like they are born with dharma. Anyways, moving on. And I was like, wait, what? We should probably talk about that a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like an overall kind of just like doesn't make me feel great about it.
Emma, is Tengoku, is that heaven? I don't know.
Ten is heaven. Goku is sort of like country or land of. So
Okay, cool.
yeah, the
Okay.
heavenly realms.
The heavenly realms. So, Steve,
But
are you-
also, like, they're just dropping Burakumin, but they're not going to really get into that.
they do that on the next page.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that's why I
Ignore
didn't bring
me.
that up, because I knew they were going to bring that up.
It's going to happen? Okay.
Yeah.
So most souls are reborn, returning to live new lives in mortal bodies, a belief that predates even the Empire. However, Rokugani also worship their ancestors, a seeming contradiction. Each soul's dharma, you probably didn't have to write that, it's a contradiction. Each soul's dharma accords them a destiny preordained by heaven. So long as that destiny goes unfulfilled, the soul will be reborn. Only when dharma is completed is the soul permitted to shuffle off the celestial wheel and enter Yomi, the realm of sacred ancestors. The fear of death holds little purchase in Rokugan, so long as it remains untainted by Jigoku, the realm of evil. A soul will return again to the Emerald Empire until it fulfills its destiny.
So let's,
Okay.
mash Buddhism and Shinto together.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
Which,
gonna-
like, happens, but also, like, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
Sentiment of just having like to describe like those two ideas and mash them into one paragraph. Obviously, you're gonna miss some nuance there. We see it here, and on first read, it's like, it's just confusing. But at worst, you've kind of taken someone's like deep belief
Yeah.
and just kind of like waved your hands over it. So if Dharma is really important to you and you read this, you'd kind of be like,
It's just a religious mashup.
Yeah.
They didn't mash up Asian cultures in here. They just mashed up Asian religions.
Yeah.
But, like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's just hard because, like, the soul is permitted to shuffle off the celestial wheel. The whole goal of Buddhism is to not be within that cycle anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, shuffling off, like,
It's a poor choice of words.
it makes it sound weird. But also, Yomi is not the realm of sacred ancestors. It's just the world of not even just the world of the dead. Yomi in Shintoism is just the other world where you happen to go when you're dead, but it's also where a lot of the monsters, Oni, yokai, and all of that kind of originate from. It's like a weird way to put those two things together.
Somebody said that religious mashup is actually an in-universe event. Interesting.
Okay.
I'm curious to see what they do. Monty's just like smiling.
Let's say I started off confused. I did my research into the lore. I am still confused. So I'm probably the worst person to ask because I'm just like, anyway.
I mean, that says a lot about the accessibility of the material.
Yeah.
That being said, there's also a lot to say about D&D's like religions and pantheons, which certainly aren't that developed. There's like, here are the deities. Okay, those who serve. The samurai, those who serve, rule Rokugan in the name of the Hantai. The class consists of many social ranks. The kuge, or houses of the nobility, consist of the emperor and imperial families. The family lines of the clan champions, the heads of vassal families, and the greatest servants of the Hantai. The buke, or chivalric houses, comprises all other samurai, including provincial daimyo and city governors, magistrates, and others. The vast majority of the buke were warriors, courtiers, and shugenja, down to the jisamurai, or half-samurai, those not allowed the name of their lord, including Ronin. Custom forbids a samurai from questioning or opposing someone of higher social rank without extreme justification, or treating those of equal rank with anything less than the complete respect and courtesy. They may treat those below them, however, they please. Although Bushido still governs their actions. Any thoughts on the samurai there? I'm just the only thing I don't like about the samurai here is like, yes, they're playing on these stereotypes of the samurai as like honor-bound warriors, and we've said that multiple times. But I just hate how they've taken a Shugendo and what we've learned about it since we've read Oriental Adventures, and I've basically been like, yep, they're just samurai monks, which is just not the case.
And it really diminishes like what it means to like be a monk or an aesthetic, right? It's like there's a lot to it, and when you mash up, you lose a lot of like the fun lumps in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
When you said mashup, all I thought of was Glee. Sorry. I know.
I'm sorry too.
I know.
Those who work. The vast majority of people in I'm just like blowing past Glee here. The vast majority of people in Rokugan are the Bonge, also called the Haimen or half people. These peasants keep the nation running by cultivating the land, crafting the tools, implements of daily life, and transporting those goods across the empire by land or sea. Farmers who grow rice and other food are considered the most important of the Bonge. Below the farmers are the craftspeople. Below the farmers are craftspeople, carpenters, blacksmiths, brewers, and practitioners of other skilled trades. Below them are merchants, regarded with contempt by all others, since they do not actually make anything themselves. Seldom permitted to carry weapons, save for ashigaru, peasant military levies, and budoka, armed retainers to samurai, heimin have few defenses physically or legally. As a being with a higher social and spiritual status, a samurai may demand anything from heimin who belong to their lord without recompense, and can kill any heimin who disobeys or fails to show respect.
How do you pronounce that?
Amen.
Heimin. Okay.
Yeah. So it's tricky because their use. Let me think for a second.
I love how they just say the farmers who grow rice or other things.
The way they've written this, though, it should be like "Hey, Eamon," but like "Hey, Heyman." I don't know. Here's the problem: it's written in Roman.
So maybe we can start from here, because like I read this and I see a lot of words I don't understand, and they're defined in literally a sentence fragment, and then I have to assume like what the rest is. In your words, like what is like a Haman?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before.
Half people? Yeah, I don't know. I've heard Ashigaru before. It's just like a foot soldier.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
And the Burakumin is a historical term as well.
That's like a thing and is actually serious and has real life consequences. I don't know. I don't know anything about something like a Haman.
Well, I mean, we'll have. Sounds like we'll have something to talk about for a Burakumin.
Yeah. Let's finish this off.
Yeah.
The samurai are also responsible to Haman, as described in the celestial order. The Bonge's dharma is to work the land and obey the samurai, and it is the samurai's duty to protect the Haman and administrate the empire. Slaying a Haman means answering to the Haman's lord. So you have like a very strict feudal system and like responsibilities.
Yeah, they're just like, these are just the common folk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The next section here is those who do not belong, the third class of people. So there is a third class called the Burakumin, or Hamlet people, who are sometimes known as Hinin, or non-people. Due to their proximity to death or dishonorable acts, these criminals, torturers, undertakers, butchers, and tanners are considered unfit as companions for samurai, save in the direst of circumstances. Even a kindly lord's speech might be discolored by the pejorative term eta, a slur meaning abundance of filth. Burakumin are considered deeply unclean, and associating with them too often requires the samurai to undertake special purification rituals. Burakumin must live in a special village on the outskirts of society, and they are deeply afraid of samurai. More so than Bonge, pure Burakumin can be killed for no reason at all without legal consequence. Testing newly forged blades by cutting down the nearest Hinin isn't uncommon. Entertainers who aren't samurai, including geisha, are also technically hidden for special reasons, because they are non-people. Samurai may fully relax around them with no social stigma. The stress of maintaining one's face can and will wear on even the most stoic of samurai. In the company of a geisha, under the gentle strains of shamisen music, samurai may laugh, complain about their lord and family, or cry at their lot in life. So, I like the art. this
I mean, like, you know what's really interesting? How they certainly take liberties with the history that they go in here, and that's totally okay, right? That's totally okay. But there are times when you should take liberties, or there are times when you should change things, or there are times when you should, make more progressive changes. And one of them that they don't make here is, oh yeah, geisha, they're non-people. It's like, you don't need that here. You don't need that.
We often get this criticism where it's like, hey guys, it's fantasy, right? Like, you can just make it up. I don't like that argument per se, because it ignores the fact that that goes both ways, in that because it's a fantasy, we can also remove the things that are shitty. Right? The mistreatment of people and like the harm real people experienced, because it's a fantasy game and because it's our fantasy game, we can choose to represent that however we want, and we can choose to tell whatever stories we want, and those stories should be reflective of like what we believe in as people today. If you want a world that like mistreats people and things like that, I think you should really like take a second look how you're framing it up. If it's just okay for people to be non-people, and like that's the way it was divined by the gods, I think you need to really reconsider what kind of game you're playing, how you're presenting it, and who you're playing with,
or what kinds of fantasies that you want to live. It's a big one. That's
also like, why are you drawing so heavily from history and people's realities then, if it's fantasy? Like, that's where it becomes hard for me, because the Burakumin, they still have people who are descendants of Burakumin who had faced a lot of issues within Japanese society because of that class concept. Like, this isn't something that died for everyone, or it's not that far away. So when you want to say like, oh, it's just fantasy, it's like, well, not for everyone. And then why is your fantasy playing off of some of these things? Like,
yeah, and I see some people in the chat who are saying the geisha are not prostitutes in this game. They're entertainers and they're well respected. Like, that might be the case in this game, and we haven't read that yet. And
geisha were never prostitutes.
Yeah, they're entertainers. But we're not making that point. The point we're trying to make is that they're saying that geisha are non-people. That's the point we're making. It's not that they're prostitutes, because a lot of people think that. No, they're entertainers. But we're saying that why do you mention women and say that they're basically non-people? That's the big thing here. And that's when you can take liberties.
Yeah. Prostitutes are people. Let's just put that
100% do. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, even if they were painted as prostitutes here, like, it's weird to say that they're not people.
Yeah, I think they could have.
They don't belong.
I think all we're trying to say is they could have taken some real liberties here instead of leaning into these real parts of history. That's it. Okay, Samurai's life. I'm just kind of skipping ahead and seeing. Honestly, like the Samurai's life, Beth, we can.
There's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I do want to read, like, based on what we've read in Oriental Adventures, I do want to read the part on marriage. Because Oriental Adventures has some shit on marriage. So I do want to read that. I mean, like, I'm assuming that a lot of the stuff they're going to talk about with the samurai are very similar to what you see in pop culture.
I will give you kind of like a quick, like, my notes of the things before marriage that I kind of liked or I wanted to highlight. So one was that every like prominent noble clan or what have you, they have like a family dojo, and you're enrolled in it when you're like 8 years old or so. Cool, that makes sense. Like, you're now like getting into like adulthood, and like you need to like learn the family trades and secrets and things like that. Cool. Family dojo, cool idea. The idea that your teachers will be looking for the ones who are most talented and skilled and like put them in special schools, also a cool idea. I had nothing wrong with it. I think it was just like cool. I don't know how I would use it in the game, but that's separate.
Totally.
And then there was some stuff I actually really liked around the passing down of like hereditary or ancestral weapons and other like artifacts.
I love that.
I think that's really cool. But the thing I like the most about it is that obviously there's not enough ancestral artifacts to go around, so some of them are just replicas. And I love that they included that because that's really cool. Like, oh, like the best child will get like the actual great grandfather's sword, but all of you can have the replica. And I'm like, that's great. I love that.
I want to play the character who gets the replica but thinks it's the real one. That's the character that I'd be playing.
That's so mean. Like your mom takes you aside, like, no, this is the real one, but really she's lying to you.
Yeah,
love that.
I mean,
There's
that's
some like
it's a narratively interesting character in Law and Order L5R.
Yeah,
right. Counterfeit swords. I'm serious about this Law and Order L5R thing. I want to do that.
I hear you.
All right, so that was my quick little take there about like some other stuff we're gonna skip, but let's go into marriage because yes, there's some stuff to talk about here.
Yeah, love has a place in Rokugan, in pillow books and wistful poems to one's beloved. For marrying, for true love is rare. Marriage in a feudal society is predicated upon what's best for the family and alliances, and thus the talent and bloodlines of young samurai are often traded for favors and strategic resources. For a samurai to balk or refuse this is considered the same thing as refusing any other commands of their daimyo, grounds for seppuku, ritual suicide. And thus, most samurai wouldn't even consider questioning it. In that one paragraph that they had on marriage, they really didn't talk too much about marriage and more about loyalty. That's all I have to
suicide.
say. And
suicide.
And suicide.
God.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say on this, and I'll be pretty brief, is that arranged marriages happen today.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a fantasy concept.
I almost had one.
I have members of my family who we don't talk about why certain members are married and what have you. And like there's like when we talk about honor and things like that, my experience living through honor and shame is like a very close one to like my familial roots. There's a reason why I'm not very close to my family. That said, what we have here is taking this concept that is real and like does affect real people's lives, and then immediately connecting it to ritualistic suicide and not going into the nuances about that.
Yeah, I mean yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna just like double down. Suicide is a very serious topic, and if you're going to include ritualistic suicide in your game, it behooves you to treat it with respect.
Yeah, and for me, I think though the one thing here is like arranged marriages for political and military reasons are totally common and totally happened pretty like in most societies in this world, and like there's nothing wrong with putting that in this game. Again, I think my biggest criticism with L5R so far is this could be more interesting if you didn't lean into these tropes or lean into the things that were honestly pretty bland or vanilla. Like I would have loved to learn more about marriage, or I would have loved for them to, take liberties here or talk about gender in ancient Japan, right? With third genders in Japan, which was a big thing. And samurai took companions who were young teenage boys. But they don't talk about that here. They just talk about like, yes, loyalty, alliances, marriage, seppuku. It's just, I think my criticism with L5R goes back to this could be more interesting. So far.
Also, yeah, I don't know. In like, I don't know, a more realistic position, like considering a daimyo to be like, you follow my rules or you kill yourself is hopefully not how it actually works out in this game, because I don't think any daimyo would be like, well, I could lose a valuable like part of my
you're a very talented soldier
just by being like, you don't want to marry someone. Like that seems like something that wouldn't actually have played out and is a poor choice even within a game setting to be like, oh, that marriage isn't going to work. Well, may as well just lose everyone now instead of just the alliance.
Because they talk about they don't talk about pragmatism here.
Yeah, because like one, you're still not going to have the alliance. Now two, you're down like a quality potential warrior or whatever in your group. Like, This doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how much that adds to this conversation, but like, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Somebody
It's
said,
because it's honor.
somebody said, just wait until Emma sees the scorpion stories.
Uh-oh.
I think the audience is just expecting everyone to. This is the cast.
They're waiting.
They're just waiting.
I feel like everyone's waiting for us to hit the Scorpion Clan, and I'm like, that doesn't make me feel good about that. Like, I'm not excited for that.
I think we already know what to expect of the Scorpion Clan since we looked at the third edition Oriental Adventures Handbook.
Yeah.
I
think retirement we can kind of skip over. I do kind of like it. It talks about cutting off, like shaving your head or cutting off your hair and things like that. And I'm not Japanese, so I don't really understand, but I know that hair, from like a very Confucius kind of like philosophical thing, is like your hair is a gift to you by your parents. And it's why my parents always rag on me about my hair until one day I shaved my head and they stopped talking about my hair because they were like, Steve clearly is not playing by our rules. But hair is important. It totally is, right? And that's just like a thing it is. To include it is great. I wish I had gone more detail about it. I actually think there's more substance and like more interesting things to talk about from an outsider looking in. And we missed an opportunity here, but otherwise I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Let's read Funeral. Mm-hmm. The last act of a samurai, death with dignity, is a solemn affair. While many samurai seek an honorable death in battle, this isn't always possible. When a samurai dies, their deeds are read before a group of dignitaries and loved ones gathered around an ornate pyre built to represent the elements that made up a samurai's soul. The body is cremated, and the burnt bones are picked out of the ashes and with specialized chopsticks. For the dead must never be touched. Seppuku is another possible end for a samurai, ritual suicide to cleanse the family and the individual of the samurai's dishonor. Successful performance of seppuku generally redeems a samurai's shame, allowing them to try to seek honor and dharma again in a different life.
So yeah, I think it's fine for like the fantasy setting. I think there's not enough said about like death and like what it means, and the chopstick thing. Obviously,
yeah. Apparently, they're a thing. I'm going to.
I don't know. Maybe there actually are specialized chopsticks. I know definitely that my family gifted me like very special chopsticks.
This is a thing.
Okay, so I mean, like my grandmother, before she passed away while she was sick, she went to Vietnam and got me very special chopsticks, and like that was a very emotional moment for her. So I get that, right? Especially considering like it's a vessel to like put food and like sustenance into your body. There's absolutely spiritualism there. The idea that, where was I going with this?
Yeah, this is a thing.
The idea that seppuku doesn't restore your honor, but actually removes shame. I don't know if they wrote that on purpose, but I like that they did that because it would have flowed very easily in the Rokugan setting to be like, oh yeah, if you commit seppuku, you restore your honor or like gain honor to your family or things like that. No. They decided to write it as in it removes your shame. And that is the idea of like honor and shame and like all like the intricacies there. They've like begun to scratch the surface on that. I'd love to see more of that as you go through here. I haven't read the amount I've read ahead. I don't see it, but I remain optimistic that I think there's like, we'll see like more like little glimpses through the shell.
Yeah. Life without purpose. The exception to the samurai way of life is the lifestyle of a Ronin, literally wave man, one tossed by the vicissitudes of fate. A samurai need not accept seppuku to cleanse their honor. They may choose to forsake their duty and leave. Though many Ronin do not conform to the stereotype of honorless, masterless samurai, some are simply the children of Ronin, born to their station, acting with greater honor than many samurai of the great clans. Enough do that they are automatically assumed to be untrustworthy and without decency. Okay.
Yep.
I love how there's only one thing, and it's just like a little thing, and it's not necessarily a criticism. It's like, not all Ronin are honorless, masterless samurai. their kids are honorable. It's just like, okay. So we're coming up on I'm just kind of scrolling ahead just to see what we're looking at. We haven't even gotten into and Monty, I'm assuming that the world is very important to gameplay in this, because we aren't going to hit gameplay until page 21.
Wow. That's a big question. I think right now, basically what we're reading is kind of hints about what type of stories the game master is supposed to be presenting with this, I guess, samurai fiction, right? We've already kind of touched upon, like, there sounds like it's going to be like courtroom politics. You know, we touch that maybe there's going to be like a marriage and maybe like a love affair around the marriage. But so it's kind of like, wow, I don't even know how to explain this. Basically, we're looking at these really like truncated, like tiny window glimpses of what the game is supposed to be about. Whether or not that's conveyed in a way that makes sense, like I'm wondering, like, if a person's completely new to role-playing games, completely new to Japanese culture, I'm wondering if that person would be confused, is really what I'm wondering so far. So,
Yeah,
so I guess the answer is yes, kind of. So
it's an overwhelming amount of information.
It really is. Like, if somebody said, we're going to play L5R, you have to read it in order, at this point I'd be like, no, I'm good.
Or I try and rely on what I know about Japanese culture and history and, like,
Get upset.
Get things wrong and or get upset.
Get things wrong in the L5R thing, yeah. and skip to the dice. I do like the piece of art on page 20 though. I think that's pretty cool looking.
So maybe let's talk about art, because like we've skipped through a lot of art here, and I think it deserves a little bit of highlights, because I kind of like it. Like, I like it a lot, and it hits me like in a very like personal level. So like if we go to, for example, let's go to page 14 of the book.
Oh wait.
And we'll see like these figures that are like painted and things like that, and they look kind of funny.
Oh, they're the Seven Fortunes.
Yeah. I love this piece of art. I think it's great. And the reason is because like it absolutely like echoes to pieces of art that hung up in my parents' home. And like the facial expressions and like silliness is the wrong word, but there's like a levity to it, right?
Yeah.
That's all like cool. That makes me feel really good. And like I look at this and I get happy.
It's cool. It's like traditional art. It's like Buddhist art.
Yep. Yeah,
like the Seven Fortunes are all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And they usually are like, they aren't super serious all the time.
So sorry, you say Seven Fortunes, but in the game it's 8 fortunes.
8?
It's 8.
8 of them.
There's 8 of them. So
okay.
So what are the 7 fortunes? Maybe we'll start
Am I forgetting one? Or I'm mostly familiar with Ebisu because he is very popular in Hokkaido.
Do you want to explain?
I don't know if I even know enough to explain, but they are.
Seven gods of fortune. You're right.
Yeah, the 7 fortunes.
Yeah.
I don't know. They appear on a boat. They represent various things like financial well-being, or like the arts, reading, culture, music. I don't know, abundance.
Yeah, prosperity, crops.
Yeah.
Fortune in war.
Yeah.
This is neat because a lot of them, you could see the different origins in Buddhism, and then in South Asia, and then crossovers with Hinduism.
Yeah, so they are really, especially when they get to Japan, they also tend to mix with some of the Shinto gods and concepts. So there's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like syncretic, like they are these combinations of ideas that are similar enough, and so they just give them new names or similar names, and everything gets all rolled together, which is super interesting. But but they're real. They're a thing. They're all over the place. I saw a hilarious photo in an abandoned school where a bunch of kids were dressed up as the Seven Fortunes.
What?
I love that.
So good. I loved it. Also, I'm in abandoned schools because archaeologists like to store artifacts in abandoned schools in Japan because it's all government property, so they use it as storage facilities. I'm not just creeping around.
Hey, you know what?
I thought 100% you're like archaeologist, but also ghost hunter.
Just breaking into places
Ghost
and
hunter.
looking for ghosts.
I mean, I wouldn't hold it against you. That's dope. If anyone
yeah.
introduces themselves to me as a ghost hunter, you are instantly one of my friends. 100%.
Okay, wait.
did-
Can we just
yeah.
Steve, do you believe in ghosts?
I want to believe in ghosts so badly. So here's my ghost story. I've spent in total 72 hours in Savannah, Georgia, because I want to see a ghost so badly. Okay. I've gone to like the most actively haunted house in Savannah, which is the most actively haunted city in the United States. It is literally a necropolis. I get super, super drunk every time I'm there because I just want to see a ghost.
Steve's the character in the horror movie that gets killed. So
As long as by a ghost, it's fine. But I'm telling you, I do everything. People are like, Steve, here's the tree where they hung the first person charged with murder.
oh,
And if you
Steve, you're
touch
gonna
if you
love
touch the
something in
tr-
this.
If you touch the tree, you can feel a heartbeat, and your neck will feel the noose, and like you'll get like a scar. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And they're like,
go,
oh
fam.
no, it's not working tonight. I'm like,
God damn it. Apparently,
Like-
Steve, the audience, the chat is saying you're gonna love this. There's a clan called the Falcon Clan, and they hunt ghosts.
so okay, cool. Because I read the Falcon Clan, and the only thing on the Falcon Clan moving on is like I have really good eyes.
Maybe just see ghosts.
For seeing ghosts, yeah.
Good. I'm in. I'm back in, guys.
Steve's back into L5R.
That's great.
Okay, so we do this thing where we will like skip over some things to kind of get to things that might be more important. We've talked in the first episode. We talked about Bushido. We talked about its origins in the sort of common popular understanding of the samurai, and we talked about how the idea of Bushido is really more of a modern thing. And we talked about what the samurai do. Do we want to skip over the page on the code of Bushido? Because I don't imagine us being like, oh, they skipped over sincerity later in the game.
I'm fine
This
with
is
missing it, but
Monty?
the code of Bushido kind of like connects to the how you gain and lose honor and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's something you want to plug into.
Oh,
I feel like that's a hint that we should read it.
I mean,
okay. Literally,
So I've read this page, and what I came out of it with is cool. Like obviously, like if you have a way of life that focuses on compassion and honor and righteousness and sincerity and some other like qualities, I don't think anyone would look at it and be like, that's kind of like, it's totally like a cool way to live. I'm down with that.
yeah.
But the thing is, I read this and all I could think of was, man, I want a PBTA game where your labels are these 7 things. And it's a game where you're like these like this code of Bushido is actually how the person perceives himself. Like, I perceive myself as having not enough courage, or I see myself as having not enough courtesy. And either that's something that is as the character, like a point of shame, or it's something that I'm very proud of. Like, I'm proud that I am not a righteous person, or I'm very ashamed that like I don't really care about right and wrong. I don't think, from what I've read, L5R is not really like that. It's really more about these 7 things influencing like your honor score. But that was my extension of reading this.
Okay, that would be cool. I roll with sincerity.
Yeah, and a similar way that like the 5 rings are kind of like ways you approach situations.
I'm excited for that. I really want to see how the 5 rings feature like work in this game.
Yeah, the idea that you approach a situation and like this is how it looks, or this is like what's in my character's heart, that is very anti D&D. in the best way.
In a very cool way.
Yeah.
Very cool way.
Yeah. So yeah.
Can I comment?
Oh, go ahead.
Hmm?
Oh,
Can
go
I
ahead.
comment on, like, so if Bushido is really integral to the way that you build honor, I find it kind of funny that honor is one of the ways that you build honor.
Yeah.
No comment.
Okay. How do you get honor? You know,
You know, honor. It's like
Honor begets honor.
there's this clip in the there's this clip in The Office of Dwight. He's whittling like a stick, and Phyllis comes into the break room and is like, "What are you making?" He's like, "A knife." It's like, "You're making a knife with a knife?" He's like, "How else do you make a knife?" And he's that's this.
Enjoyable.
Okay, so we just need to remember that these elements, compassion, courage, courtesy, duty and loyalty, honor, righteousness, and sincerity, all figure heavily into Bushido and how you acquire honor. Because it doesn't say anything like mechanical in here. This is just like, okay, what is honor? Mayo, which if you're Chinese, that sounds like something different, is the most subtle yet the most basic and all-encompassing virtue. Yeah, these are all just standard things. Okay,
It's in the GM section. There's a huge chart about how you can gain it, how you can lose it.
Steve and I
So-
love charts on how to
Okay.
gain and lose honor.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
Okay, cool. Dope.
Hey, Steve. Let's remember. Let's not make any assumptions. I'm not saying this sarcastically. Let's not make any assumptions, and read the book as it is.
I can appreciate that.
And again, I will say this again. This is way better than Oriental Adventures, but Oriental Adventures is a very low bar.
Yeah.
But
No,
so
I'm enjoying myself.
I'm having a good time. I'm less of like, oh, I fucking hate this, and more like, I kind of want to see what comes next. Except,
Interested to see what they do with these things.
yeah, Emma's right though. You use honor to get honor. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah. And also, apparently, it's like central to all of the other virtues, which I'm assuming are the rest of the things in Bushido. So it's like, all right,
Okay.
let's
Cool.
see.
Do we want to skip over the Land of the 10,000 Fortunes because we kind of talked about how they put 8, but there's 7.
Yeah, like I'm wondering who the 8th is.
well,
But like I can look that up on my own.
so I was looking them up, and so that's what I was doing, and then I got distracted by something. But you know, ADHD be like that. So some of the ones that they used are kind of in and out of being one of the 7 wonders. There's some that are sometimes considered them, sometimes there are some that aren't. But if you, even if you search them up, they were called the 7
Fortunes.
7 fortunes.
Are they related to 8 drunken fairies?
Oh God. Okay, so there's actually listed 8, at least on the Wikipedia article. There's 8 that are listed, but they say that some of them are actually omitted sometimes. So I guess in this they just included all of them. Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Cool, why not? I don't see anything wrong. We're not going to be like, they're supposed to be 7, but they include 8. I mean, do what you want. I say we skip over this part. And
What purpose do they serve here though?
I think, do these function like deities? Yeah, this is about faith. Faith is a real intangible thing in Rokugan, and only the foolish choose not to believe. The kami are demonstrably real, and the gods are easily angered, and signs of magic and wonder can be seen even in the distant corners of the empire. If not by samurai or peasant, then by someone whom they know and trust. Merged by the second emperor Hantei Genji, Rokugan's religious beliefs encompass 3 different forms of worship: ancestor worship, or the worship of a samurai's blessed antecedents who have ascended beyond the wheel of reincarnation; fortunism, the direct worship of the gods; and shinseism, Shinseism, and the study and practice of the Tao of Shinsei. The most fundamental of the religious observances revolves around the worship of a samurai's own ancestors. From Yomi, the spirits. Okay, we already read that. What
This
is
is
what
this
we're
is
looking
what the
fortunism? I think this is supposed to be for fortunism.
yeah.
So
This is what they were talking about in chat before, where it is like intentionally all mashed up.
This is a weird mashup of religions.
So yeah, it's the weird mashup of religions that I am not an expert to talk in, but as someone who like has been like around Buddhism and like my family's interpretation of it, reading through this, I'm like, I feel like you've tried to do something and I feel like you just don't care. Like obviously faith is very important to some people and to some members of my family is incredibly important. And to see it kind of like brushed aside or like painted with like a very broad stroke as a minority, it's kind of like, all right, well, I don't know if I'm very reluctant to play any kind of religious character in this game. I was already pretty reluctant to play this game, but having read this, I'm like, I'm probably not going to touch the religion piece at all. That said, if I go into a game with in Rokugan with other players and someone's like very into religion and they're very into like this fictionalized type of religion and they start using words that like are pretty important to me, I'm probably going to be silent. I'm probably not going to say anything, but I'm probably going to internalize that pretty heavily. And I'll probably just like quietly leave the group at some point in time and not explain why. So
It's
even the idea that the Shinicism focuses on the void and that the void earlier on was like a type of nirvana, but void is like, it has a connotation with it. Like we in English speakers, we think of like void as like a void, like the action of like ignoring, but nirvana and emptiness are absolutely different. Like there's a subtle difference between that, and not going into that subtlety is at best a missed opportunity and at worst a microaggression.
Yeah, these are interesting. They, I mean, they're from Hinduism and Buddhism, except for Ibisu, right? Who's Japanese.
And Ibisu is kind of the most popular one in Japan.
I like the way
Like I
he
said.
looks here.
Yeah, he shows up on like a lot of beer labels and out front of shops, and especially seafood shops.
So Ibisu is prosperity and wealth and business, crops and food.
I'd go
Patron
explore a haunted
fisherman.
house with them.
You go to a haunted house?
I go to haunted house with them. He seems like a
Yeah.
ghost hunter.
He seems like a ghost hunter with that koi.
Yeah.
It's like a
Koi's a
skin in
ghost.
Luigi's mansion, and you suck up the ghosts with the koi.
That's fucking dope. Cause like knowing
Boom.
like basically like Eastern mythology and things like that, that koi definitely is a god and definitely is gonna talk to you and throw you shade. And I'm into
yeah.
that. Luigi's mansion, but instead of the vacuum, it's a koi, and the koi is like really salty towards you. I'm in. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, in Japan, the big sort of fish issue is catfish. The ones thought to cause earthquakes and all sorts of problems.
So we've kind of talked about how there is clearly Buddhism in here and the Hinduism, like roots in Hinduism. Fortunism, direct worship of the gods. It's an interesting way to put that. And then Shinseism?
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 Shinseism.
Yeah. So
there's
when
somebody in the
things
chat
are-
who is like very offended that we glossed over that.
Shinseism?
Yeah, so I'm curious as to why.
Why
Well,
we glossed over it, or like why it's
Yeah, apparently it's very important. Now, that's the one thing. That's the one thing with this book. This does not communicate what's very important to you, or what is important or integral to the game. And it assumes that you've read the entire book. So,
Yeah.
if Shinseism is important, I'm curious as to why, and perhaps we'll read that and then maybe end there, and then we'll start with the clans next week.
I'm also curious about Tao. Like Tao of Shinsei. Like Tao is a totally different thing from it's
Completely
a
different.
philosophy and religion in itself. So like, yeah.
So
Okay.
here we see the glossing over causing harm on both the outsiders and the people who already understand. It's like Shinseism is very important to the world. This text has glossed over it. Buddhism is very important to some players or potential players, but we've glossed over its analogy here. So like both like people looking at this, looking in, are just kind of like and then we're just expected to just kind of like go with it for a little while longer. But like that faith is going to run out at some point in time.
I will say, like, based on other RPGs and whatnot, this is a very poorly written introduction to your game. It's just, it hints that there is going to be more detail, and at times you want to know more, and then there are times when it's just like, that's a little too much. So while Fortunism celebrates diversity, another line of philosophical thought emphasizes unity, called Shinseism, for the man who promulgated its core beliefs. The ideology focuses on a core of simplicity. All the universe comes from the void and will eventually return to it. Embracing the oneness of the 5 elements or rings and living in accordance with the principles of an ordered society could, according to Shinseism, enable one to transcend the cycle of rebirth and attain enlightenment. These teachings were recorded in full during Shinsei's audience with the first emperor and became recorded in the Tao of Shinsei. Okay.
Okay. My tension,
yeah,
my thing that like makes me feel unease about this is how we use our words to describe this fantasy setting. In that we have already used a real Shinto word, Amaterasu, to describe a fictional god, but then didn't use used a fictional god's name to describe the real Shinto counterpart of the moon. And here we're talking about enlightenment with a capital E.
Isn't this supposed to be Buddhism that they're talking about here?
And yeah, they're clearly going for Buddhism. And if we go through it, Shin'eism is founded by a person, Shin'e, I believe. I might
Shinsei, not Shin'e.
Sorry, Shinsei.
Shin'e, yeah.
Shin'e.
Shinsei. Who
Sorry, just for clarity.
But clearly, like that's like Prince Siddhartha, right?
Yes.
To like complete the narrative of Buddhism. But here we have a fantasy name to do a fantasy religion, but then we're going to take parts of that actual religion and use their actual names.
Yeah,
and
that's
clearly they're not afraid of using words that are like not necessarily within the lexicon of the reader, as seen by 20 pronouns in one paragraph. But it when I read that, I'm like, what do you care about, writer and creators and things like that? Like, what are you trying to tell me?
It's like what Emma said. It's like, when is this just like a weird historical fiction, and when is this fantasy? When should they take liberties, or when are they trying to have a one-to-one connection between this game and a real-life culture, or a real-life religion, or a real-life aspect of history? It's like, and I don't know if this actually happens, if there's just like, it's L5R, and then all of a sudden there's Miyamoto Musashi. It's a thing that Oriental Adventures does really poorly, and led to a lot of the pitfalls of Oriental Adventures, where, like you said, Steve, we see these real life counterparts done very poorly, reduced to something that's overly simplistic, or just combined with other elements that are not, I would say, they just don't combine, really, right? And I think we're kind of seeing that here. I mean, this is a very poorly written section on the religion of Rokugan, because it's also not clear that this is the religion section. It's just the land of 10,000 fortunes. And then we kind of go
Except
into
there's
this
8.
one. Except there's
7.
Except there's 8, sometimes 7 fortunes. What does the 10,000 mean? And we're not shitting on L5R. I think they're certainly doing a lot better. They're certainly being a lot more respectful. And the art is actually really dope. Like, I'll say that over and over again. The art of the L5R books is fucking dope, right? I like how they've kind of leaned into this more traditional art. It doesn't feel out of place. They're using modern fonts. They're not using wonton fonts, which is, again, a really low bar. But there is a lot of good in this book. But I think so far they're just trying to do too much. They're really just trying to do a lot here. But I think the big thing with Shinseism is apparently that it's just you're trying to achieve enlightenment. And that's something they talked about, actually, in... What was that section? We talked about that as well.
What would they bring up Nirvana?
Yeah, where they bring up Nirvana. It was in an earlier section. And Emma, you were understandably critical of it. And I don't remember where that is. The Celestial Order, we were talking about it there. And shuffle off of the Celestial Wheel.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Things are just kind of out of place here. I say we end there because it is 9:07 and we've been streaming for over 2 hours. Couple things. We got everybody's socials down underneath their webcams. Folks, thank you for tuning in. Again, like, I'm still excited about this. I'm excited to read more. I'm excited to learn about this. I'm glad we're finally at the clans because I want to know what this fucking Scorpion clan's about that everybody's talking about. And
like, I'm intrigued, even if things are like, I'm got a lot of questions, but like, I want to see what's up.
And again, like, I don't think so far L5R isn't an offensive RPG. It's just at times really not that interesting. That's it. For me, I don't find this racist. I don't find this offensive. It's perhaps offensive to history, but like, you know what? Everybody could have their own opinions. I'm excited for us to learn more about the fiction. Like, that's what I care about. I care about the characters. I care about the fiction. I don't care about where they're trying to replicate history or replicate reality, because that's not what we're here for. That being said, we've got everybody's socials down below. Check them out online. Emma's not really in the TTRPG space, but hey, if you're in university right now and you have access to those sweet academic journals, you can find.
Or if you want something, I can get that for you.
Or if you want something,
if you were to tweet a thread of just like, I want to focus on this one thing about like an ancient starch or ancient like food plant, I would retweet that like instantly.
Honestly, you know what?
Instantly,
I
would be
have
like,
a few that are about
do?
Ainu. I have a few that are about Ainu plants and their importance, and also Jomon period.
I'm gonna go digging, and I'm just gonna like bump that up because I love crap like that. If you're gonna be on Bird Site, at least like learn something.
Yeah, what I honestly think is like, I say this because like I've worked with Emma before in an academic setting. If you go to Emma's Twitter, Emma, your banner is actually of starch, and I love that. Yeah. I showed it to Steve, and Steve was like, "What?"
It's from Ouba Yuri, which is a major Ainu plant.
So we got something cool. Honestly, like, we should just do another episode of the podcast on something like that. But we also have Monty's socials below. Monty, you worked on some L5R books, not this one, but you've worked on some others. Which ones were they again?
Path of Waves, Emerald Empires, and Celestial Realms, which isn't out yet.
Path of Waves is one that I'm actually, like, after finding out what it's about and people bringing it up, that's one that I'm actually really interested in actually picking up and learning about, because it talks about the non-samurai, which I am more interested in than the samurai. We've got some cool shit going on. Once again, the voting for the Ennies is now live, so go vote for us. You know, we're the first all-Asian podcast to ever be nominated for an Ennie for podcasting, and we could be the first all-Asian podcast to ever win an Ennie. Not only would that be awesome on a personal level, but I also think that would be great because it shows, you know, the tabletop gaming community and the industry, a predominantly white community and a overwhelmingly white industry, that our voices matter, our stories matter, and those who tell our stories are important. So you can go to our Twitter. You can go to any-awards.com/vote/2020. The link is in the chat right now. You can check that out. Give us a vote. Voting extends until July 12th, I believe. So get your vote in. There are a lot of really great products that are out there. This year, honestly, it looks to be a really good year for the Ennies because it's not just all Chaosium products. It's not just all Free League products. It actually looks like there's like a nice diverse spread of products there. So this is the first Ennies that I'm really excited for. Last year when I was at the Ennies, I literally sat there in the audience with Agatha, and I got 95% of all the winners right. Because if it's got Cthulhu in it, you know it's going to win an Ennie. But anyways, vote for the Ennies. We're there. Tomorrow, we are actually doing a special live episode of Dungeons and Asians. We're doing a prequel episode. We are playing Bamboo in the Dark, which is a adventure you could find in Unbreakable Volume 1 by best-selling authors Steve, Daniel, and the rest of the Unbreakable crew. Kevin Wynn is going to be our guest GM, and we're going to do a prequel on Waleed's life in the Land of Rivers, which we've now introduced. Steve, I don't know if I told you this, but we've introduced a new a Vietnamese analog into our world.
You were telling me, and I'm so excited for it because I'm excited to just have the conversation with other people to be like, how do we write fantasy Vietnam? Because I am very disconnected from that culture, despite the fact that like I identify as one.
I'm super excited because we've actually had this like long thread going on, and we were talking. Honestly, it's like we're talking about like, okay, what are things that are okay to happen in our game? What are things that we want? Is this name okay? Hey, Kevin, what are some names that I can use that are culturally appropriate? The kinds of conversations that, you know, I think should happen at every gaming table are happening behind the scenes. And so we're going to play that tomorrow at noon on this channel. Tune in. It's also going to be on our podcast feed and our YouTube channel, just like this video. You know what? I'm really happy that we got to do this. I'm happy that we got to learn how you could use honor to get more honor. I'm happy how we learned about this religious mashup, but I'm also happy that, you know, we got to see some really cool art and learn some really cool things about Japan. You know what? This week has been honestly pretty poopy. You know, there's some bad things going on in the industry right now. And there are some voices that, you know, I don't want to hear because they're trying to diminish other voices. But, you know, doing this stream, talking to the three of you, chatting with our chat here, you know, makes that, you know, so much better. You know, it fills me with hope that, you know, we can produce something really cool, all of us together and the four of us together. So that being said, if you want to be a part of this community, if you want to engage with this community, if you want to meet new people, meet like-minded folks, or even learn, you can join us on our Discord. So our mod, we have two mods now, Peter and Drew, but Drew beat Peter to it. We have a Discord server, so come join it. We are working really hard on, you know, creating a safe and inclusive space for all of you folks to participate in and learn from. There was a really good discussion about L5R in the Discord after last Friday. I'm excited what's going to happen today, and come join us. We also play a ton of video games. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow for D&D, or we'll see you next Friday for L5R. Bye, everyone.